The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
Huge occasion for Celtic in Europe this week, Neil, and of course it brings back wonderful memories for you going back to 2019, the double over Lazio. Let's talk about that first leg, 24th of October. How are you feeling going into that game?
Well, feeling good. We'd started the group well, but we knew that Lazio, at the time, on the current form, I think they were second in Serie A. They had a great coach, obviously, in Simone Inzaghi, and they played 3-5-2. And they did it so well, and they were without really being like full of superstars. They had players who were in brilliant form at the time, like Immobile, Milinkovic-Savic, Cataldi, and Lucas Leiva. So they had a mix of real sort of, quality players with experience as well. But we were looking forward to the game, and Kenny, at European night at Celtic Park, and I know from my own experience as a player and obviously managing there before that it can raise your game, and we felt good going into the game.
Talk us through then the first half, 40 minutes you went behind. How were you feeling at that point? Did you feel at any point the game was getting away from you, or were you always confident that your team could do the business that night?
No, well, the goal was a bit of a blow. Can't remember the wing-back's name, but he's still there. He broke down the right-hand side, and they were quite slick with the movements, and he crashed one in. So it was a bit of a blow to win at half-time, and then we did feel that they had control of the game for 10-15 minutes the second half. So I decided to change the formation. We went from 4-3-3 to 3-5-2 and matched them up, and that worked out perfectly for us. So it did.
Yeah, it was Lazzari with a goal. And I'm always interested in that, Neil, the tactical side of the game, because, when you're watching it, at what point you make that change. And is that something the players are always very comfortable with? You'll have worked through 2 or 3 different formations during the week, depending on the scenario when it comes to the match itself.
Yeah, look, when you're playing with when you're working with players at that level, they can be flexible and adapt. And we did talk about it anyway. Sort of in the days leading up to the game, and we did it many times. I've done it many times in my career, whether it be at Celtic or Hibs or at other clubs, that you have to be, willing to adapt in game. And it was an important call. It was the right call. Sometimes they go for you, Kenny. Sometimes they don't. But we felt that they were just starting to, impose themselves on us a lot more. And I think they hit the post. And that was the catalyst then for me to go, right, we need to change this and, get a foothold in the game. So we did go 3-5-2. We put Christie off Edward. And, that turned out to be, a good combination, because that led to the two of them linking up for the equaliser.
Yeah, Christie with the equaliser in 67 minutes, and then incredible scenes at the end, 89 minutes, Julien with the win. He was a terrific player, wasn't he?
Well, we brought him, because he could be a threat, and he was very good in both boxes early. And yeah, he came up with some big goals for Celtic over his time there. And again, I think it was Christie with the corner, and there was zonal, and he picked a space to get in between 2 zonal markers, and it was a great ball in, and he timed it on perfectly. And to come away with the win was, very satisfying. We've beaten a good team. We matched them for long periods in the game, and it gave us a lot of confidence, going forward in the group then.
You played some great football, Neil. I was looking back at the BBC match report from that night, and it talked about Neil Lennon's high-risk, high-reward strategy. Do you think that's a fair description of how you try to approach games as Celtic manager?
Absolutely. I would rather lose the game 2 or 3-0 going for Kenny than lose the game 1-0 and holding out. So I always feel that with that particular group, or whatever group I had at Celtic, there were goals in them. And we do try and work on attempts of goal, attempts on target. A lot of people talk about stats, but for me, the main stat, if you're a coach, is how many attempts at goal, good attempts at goal have you had? And talented players in the team. We talked about Christie and Edward, but there were avenues that we could score goals from, Elyounoussi and Forrest and the like. So, yeah, I just felt that we had to gamble a little bit, and sometimes the gamble pays off for you.
It certainly did that night. As you say, the change you made at half-time was pivotal. So a fantastic 2-1 home victory. 2 weeks later, you go away to Italy. Were you aware of Celtic's record in Italy, Neil? Celtic had never beaten an Italian side in Italy in 13 previous attempts.
No, it wasn't. But we were, again, off the back of beating Lazio. We'd beaten Cluj. I think we drew away with Rennes. So, we had 7 points already, Kenny, and we were feeling that, again, it was an opportunity to get something out of the game. We were going well domestically. So we were quietly confident. But we knew the enormity of the game. And again, as I touched on earlier in the interview, we knew how good a team that Lazio were. At home, you'd expect them to have plenty of the ball. And that turned out to be the case early on. But we'd gone out like a day earlier than we normally do and just take the boys out, let them rest a little bit. Went round the little walk around Rome, the Colosseum and the Vatican, and just sort of took it as a little bit of a mini break as well, just to sort of relax them a little bit more. And when it come to the game, they were really chomping at the bit to play.
There was, of course, a backstory to it, Neil. There usually is with the football matches. Lazio had been ordered for your return game, actually, with them to close parts of their stadium down because the fans had been guilty of horrendous behaviour, racism, fascism. And what I like, Neil, looking back on it, you gave your players the absolute backing. So if there's any of that tonight, you'll support them if they come off the park.
Absolutely, yeah. We don't tolerate that in any walk of life, but certainly, with the standards that you set as a human being, your own sort of moral sort of stand on things, and obviously the stance of the club as well, and we wouldn't have had any hesitation in doing that.
Yeah, 10,000 Celtic fans made the journey out there. As ever, incredible backing in Europe, but they were silenced early on. Immobile, a great player, with a goal in 7 minutes. So there was a lot of pressure, Neil, in that opening half hour. How were you feeling on the touchline?
Well, we didn't start the game well. We were hesitant, and we weren't playing to our levels. So I was frustrated more than anything else. I wasn't nervous. I was, wouldn't say angry, because people always deem me as angry, but there's of course a frustration there because they can play better, and we needed to get a foothold in the game and start getting some passes in, which we weren't doing in the first 15, 20 minutes. We were under a huge amount of pressure. And Immobile, who, at that time was probably one of the best strikers. He was probably Italy's best striker, but one of the best around Europe. He scored a good goal. And sometimes you have to accept that, Kenny, that the opposition are going to score. And you prepare for that as well, being a goal down. We were in the first leg. So the thing is to, remain calm, but, get some passes in and, get some territory and get some, feel of the ball and some fluidity. And eventually we did that because they had a good mentality, that team. The quality players, your Browns and your McGregors, like we touched on Elyounoussi and Edward, and with good speed and legs in the wing back area with Hayes and James Forrest. We knew that they would cause problems eventually in the game, and that turned out to be the case. We scored a fantastic equaliser, and then from then on, we matched Lazio the game to and fro. We had chances, they had chances, and it was just our night when we got the winner, and it was a perfectly timed winner.
It certainly was. Actually, the more I read about the game and everything around it, Neil, the more remarkable and fantastic the result was. You touched there on Immobile. He was actually top scorer in Serie A at the time. As I said, Celtic had never won in Italy. Before we just go back to that incredible scene at the end and Cham getting the winner, talk to us about Fraser Forster. He had another big night for you, didn't he?
He certainly did in the first leg. He made a great save right at the death from a volley. It was incredible. I think it was from Cataldi or Luis Alberto where he smashed it and Fraser got a big hand to it. Fraser was, he's a goalkeeper I admired for a long time. Obviously, I had him at my first spell at Celtic where he did, wonderfully well, and then went on to get his big move to the Premier League and got capped for England. But he wasn't playing at Southampton, and I knew his ability, and he's a goalkeeper. He makes saves that other goalkeepers can't make, and Celtic was a great fit for him, and I knew him inside out. And you always need your goalkeeper, Kenny, and the big games, I'm especially away from home in Europe, and he gave the back three, the back five, a huge amount of confidence. And again, he made a couple of, I wouldn't say like miraculous saves, but he made some really competent saves. But I always felt we were in the game. I never felt that the game was run away from us, and always felt we were, good going forward, and gives Lazio plenty of problems with the quality that we had in the final third, and also our pressing was good throughout. Our fitness levels were good. Good legs in the team, like I said, the speed and the power we had in the wide areas, and we really strong midfield as well that night. Like, you're never overconfident, but I was always happy with the way the game was going. I expected Lazio to get some chances with the quality that they had, but also expected us to create some chances too.
Edouard had a chance, actually, didn't he, before Nchan got that late winner?
Yeah, he had a great chance, yeah. So, we put a lot of preparation into it. Sometimes I think, people say you're lucky, but when you do the work and you do the preparation and you do you take the time on the tactical side of the game, then that hopefully if they make the right decisions at the right time, you may get rewarded. And when Sean came on as a sub, he's a good sub to have, and he linked up brilliantly. The timing of the pass from Edward was perfect, but we had a couple other chances like that, Kenny, previously that we didn't execute. But in the end, and Sham came up with a delightful goal, and yeah, it's one of the highlights of my career. There's no question. People always talk about Barcelona, but I felt, I wouldn't say Lazio was equal to that, but it's certainly up there with, one of the results of my career as a player or a manager.
What was the reaction from the Italians? Shock?
Yeah, shock. Yeah, but we had every right to celebrate, and because we played well. It wasn't like we were hanging on, Kenny. It wasn't like. It was sort of concerted periods of pressure that we had to withstand. The game, like I said, the second half ebbed and flowed. And I was pleased with the mentality of the players, and, the game management was excellent as well.
Take us into the dressing room after the game, Neil. What was that like?
Just unbridled joy and, pride. And again, the sort of, once it sank in, the magnitude of the result, and obviously what it meant to not just the players, but the supporters and people back home who probably couldn't get out the room. I had a feeling the night before the game. You get these wee feelings sometimes where I did the interview at the stadium, and I walked out onto the terraces, and it was a brilliant stadium. The Olympic Stadium in Rome is absolutely sensational. The pitch looked immaculate, and you just got a wee sort of kick off a little bit of a buzz, and just a real good feeling about it. And thankfully, that proved to be the case, and it really gave us it cemented a good reputation for us that season in Europe.
Yeah, and when I look back on it, Neil, 2 games to go, and that was you securing your place in the last 32. I mean, that's when you think some of the struggles our teams have now in Europe. That was an incredible achievement.
Yeah, it was a reasonable group. Like Cluj should knock us out in Champions League. We wanted to get one over on them, obviously. Then you had Lazio, who were strong, and Rennes, who were going. I think they were like 3rd or 4th in the French league, and we disposed of them at home very, very well. So we topped the group for the first time in the club's history as well. So, yeah, I mean, very, very good memories of it, and with some real quality on the pitch, and some exciting players, and the adaptability of them really impressed me as well. Like I said, we went from a 4 to a back 3, and they were able to, cope with that really, really well. To be fair, Kenny, in all the games we scored, we looked a threat going forward. We looked a really good unit.
I'm thinking as well, Neil, you achieved a hell of a lot as a player, but as a manager, when you face a challenge like that and you make the team selection, you make the changes in game, you deliver the team talk, you're there as a presence in the touchline, and then you get a result like that, it must be incredible pride, satisfaction for you.
Yeah, huge, and that's the one thing you miss about, well, Yeah, I mean, I'm chomping at the bit to get back into management, because that you miss that feeling, of doing the prep work, of picking the team, and then it coming off for you, and the players getting such a belief in what they're doing, and obviously what it means to the club as well and the supporters.
And just finally, Neil, as we look ahead to when Celtic go out to Rome, what are the key things to getting a result out there? What would you be saying to the players, that the things that they must do on that night?
Manage the game, try and get a foothold in the game early, and have a belief that you can, one, score, because I think this current Celtic team have got goals in them. So, there's a lot of belief there. I don't think Lazio are in, great form, domestically, but you still have to respect them. They've got a very experienced coach, and still some players from that era of 2019. But, your game management is pivotal, particularly at this level of football. And obviously, put a lot of emphasis on, believing that Joe will have a really good game, and that'll give them a lot of confidence going into the tie.
That's it for this edition of the Scottish Football Podcast. Thank you very much indeed to Neil Lennon for his memories. Full coverage of Celtic against Lazio in the Champions League tomorrow night on Sports, and the programme kicks off at 7:05. Join us then. Bye for now.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.